When you look at your smartphone or, watch an electric vehicle just kind of glide silently past you on the street, it's incredibly easy to see this marvel of modern, seamless global cooperation.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, parts are manufactured here, assembly happens over there.
Right, and it all just comes together perfectly.
Yeah, it gives this total illusion that the global economy is just this frictionless, perfectly oiled machine where supply simply meets demand without a hitch.
But what if I told you that exact same device, like the battery powering it or that high-definition screen you're staring at, is currently viewed as such a massive geopolitical vulnerability that it literally has the United Nations Security Council on edge?
Yeah, it's wild. We've rapidly transitioned from viewing these technologies as, mere consumer goods to recognizing them as critical vulnerabilities.
Because that global machine isn't frictionless at all, is it?
Not even close. It is highly fragile, and the tension is really building right now.
Which is exactly why we're doing this deep dive today. We are looking at a remarkably detailed source, the March 2nd through 8th, 2026 issue of VERIDICOR's News of the Week report, just to understand exactly how this transition to clean energy is completely rewiring global supply chains.
And it is a dense report. It's a really high-level industry briefing covering everything from critical minerals to infrastructure bottlenecks and all these major geopolitical stress points.
It is dense, but our mission today is to pull out the absolute most fascinating aha moments from this material so you, the listener, can sound like the smartest person in the room at your next meeting. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Well, to really grasp the stakes here, we need to start with the macro picture. The Veridicor report highlights a truly startling event right out of the gate.
Well, the UN briefing.
Exactly. On March 5th, the UN Security Council held a briefing, and the explicit topic of that meeting was linking critical minerals, things like lithium, cobalt, nickel, rare earths, directly to global energy security.
Which, I mean, that is a massive paradigm shift. Historically, the UN Security Council dedicates its time to debating, troop movements, border disputes, nuclear proliferation.
Right, actual physical conflicts.
Yeah. And now they are dedicating their time to talking about rocks and dirt. Why are minerals we've been pulling out of the ground for centuries suddenly the most important geopolitical chess pieces on the board?
Well, because these materials are no longer just commodities traded on an open market for, a small profit margin, they are the actual physical structural pillars of our future energy systems and digital infrastructure.
So you literally can't build the future without them.
You simply cannot build a wind turbine, a solar grid, or an EV battery without them. And the core issue terrifying the Security Council right now is geographic concentration.
So are we basically seeing the oil weapon of the 1970s being replaced by the lithium and cobalt weapon of the 2020s?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the answer is a resounding yes. But the mechanics are actually much more complex than the oil crisis.
Also,
Well, with traditional commodities, if one country has a political crisis, you can usually buy from somewhere else. But with these transition minerals, the reserves, and especially the highly specialized facilities required to process them, they're heavily concentrated in just a handful of nations.
right, which creates massive supply bottlenecks.
Exactly. And the report points to a perfect real-world example of this anxiety. On March 3rd, global aluminum prices experienced this sudden, incredibly sharp surge.
Yeah, I saw that in the notes. But what fascinated me was that the report makes it clear the price didn't spike because the world suddenly ran out of bauxite, which, for those listening, is the raw ore needed to make aluminum.
Right, the mines didn't suddenly go dry. The price spiked purely out of fear.
Fear of what, exactly?
To understand why, you have to look at the mechanics of how aluminum is actually made. Smelting aluminum isn't just a matter of melting some rocks in a big furnace.
It takes a lot of juice, right?
An incredible amount. It is an incredibly energy-intensive process. It requires absolutely massive, uninterrupted amounts of electricity to separate the aluminum from the oxygen in the bauxite ore.
Wow.
And on top of that, you have these highly complex maritime transport routes required just to get the raw bauxite to the smelters in the first place, and then to ship the finished heavy metal to manufacturing hubs globally.
So when the market saw rising geopolitical tensions in key regions specifically, I think the report mentioned concerns over maritime security in the Middle East. They didn't wait for a boat to actually sink.
No, they completely panicked. The interconnected nature of these logistics means that even metals produced across multiple continents are extremely vulnerable to political shocks.
Like a domino effect.
Exactly. If a shipping lane is even slightly threatened, maritime transport insurance skyrockets. And if the insurance skyrockets, the smelters can't afford to import the raw materials.
Or they can't secure the immense power generation needed to run the plants.
Right, and the entire chain just freezes.
Yeah. So the key takeaway for you listening is this. In the current critical minerals market, political anxiety is literally just as expensive as actual scarcity. The mere threat of a disruption, just the fear that the boats might stop or the power grid might falter, is enough to send prices skyrocketing and stall manufacturing globally.
And when major powers realize their supply chains are this alarmingly fragile and that anxiety alone can just tank their industrial output, they start to scramble. I mean, they desperately need alternatives.
And nowhere is that scramble more obvious or honestly more difficult than with cobalt. Let's look at the situation between the United States and the Democratic Republic of Congo, the DRC.
Oh, yeah. That is a major focal point.
According to the VERIDICOR briefing, the DRC controls roughly 70% of global cobalt production.
70%. It is a staggering market share for a mineral that is entirely non-negotiable for modern battery supply chains.
Because it stops the batteries from catching fire.
Right. Exactly. Cobalt is the specific element that provides thermal stability. It is literally what keeps the lithium-ion batteries in your phone and your EV from overheating and bursting into flames.
To put that 70% in perspective, just imagine if a single country controlled 3/4 of the entire world's wheat supply. If they decided to stop shipping, or if a conflict disrupted their ports, the entire world starves. That is the DRC with battery technology right now.
And the U.S. and other Western governments have been actively trying to diversify their supply chains away from the DRC for years.
Because of the instability there.
Right. There is immense hesitancy regarding the security conditions in eastern Congo, alongside some pretty severe governance challenges. But the report notes that this diversification is proving much slower and way more difficult than policymakers hoped.
Because you simply cannot ignore the geology. I mean, you can want to buy your cobalt from somewhere else all day long, but if the vast majority of it is sitting under one specific patch of dirt, your options are severely limited.
Which forces governments to explore avenues they previously closed off entirely.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Because when options are that limited, governments start doing things that would have been totally unthinkable just a few years ago. The March 4th briefing details that U.S. Interior Secretary Doug Burgum actually traveled to Caracas to meet with Venezuelan authorities.
Yeah, and he wasn't alone. He was accompanied by representatives from over 24 mining companies, all there to discuss potential investment opportunities in Venezuela's reserves.
What were they looking for specifically?
They were specifically looking at gold bauxite, which we mentioned earlier, as the precursor to aluminum and coltan.
Right, coltan. Remind us why that one is so important.
Coltan is a vital mineral that regulates electricity flow. It basically keeps our advanced electronics from short-circuiting.
Now, just to be very clear to our listeners, we are simply reporting the dynamics outlined in the VERIDICOR briefing here. We are absolutely not endorsing any political stance on U.S.-Venezuela relations.
Right. Totally impartial here. We're just looking at the market reality.
Exactly. But the raw dynamic is fascinating. For years, these two nations have had an incredibly strained relationship, defined by heavy sanctions and diplomatic distance.
But the global demand for these minerals possesses such an intense gravitational pull that it is literally reopening diplomatic dialogues. And Venezuela is actively trying to capitalize on this desperation.
How so? What does the report say they're doing?
It details how they are looking at reforming their mining laws specifically to attract this foreign capital. The mechanism they're exploring is trying to bypass previous nationalization laws to allow foreign ownership and offer greater legal clarity.
So international companies feel safe actually putting their money in.
Exactly, participating directly without fear of having their assets seized.
It really highlights the extreme lengths major powers must go to in order to secure these resources. When national security depends on batteries, and batteries depend on metals, you kind of have to talk to whoever has the metals. Geology is completely redrawing the geopolitical map.
So on one side of the board, superpowers are scrambling for alternatives. But on the other side, the resource-rich countries are watching this scramble, and they are realizing exactly how much leverage they suddenly hold.
They know they have the winning hand.
They do, and they are no longer content to just dig dirt out of the ground.
They were changing the rules of the game.
Uh-huh.
The VERIDICOR report identifies this as a massive wave of mineral nationalism sweeping across Africa.
Hmm.
For instance, on March 3rd, there were intense debates within the African Union, where leaders made a totally unified demand. The era of exporting raw commodities has to end.
And honestly, the economic logic there is completely sound.
Right.
Think about it. If a nation simply extracts raw cobalt or lithium ore and ships it overseas, they capture mere pennies on the dollar compared to the value of a finished electric vehicle battery.
Right.
By exporting the raw dirt, they're also exporting the high-paying jobs, the technological development, and the massive industrial profits to other continents.
They want that industrial transformation to happen inside their own borders now.
Exactly. And we are seeing concrete policy shifts forcing the market to comply. The report highlights that Zimbabwe and the DRC have introduced strict export restrictions on raw lithium and cobalt.
They are essentially telling foreign tech and mining conglomerates, look, if you want access to our minerals, you have to build your processing and refining facilities right here.
And the crazy part is, the market is responding. The report mentions a brand new joint venture launched on March 3rd between a Canadian technology firm, CVMR Core, and a Congolese partner, Bitech.
Oh, to build a refinery.
Yeah, their goal is to build a vertically integrated operation to refine cobalt and copper right inside the DRC. And South Africa is pursuing the exact same strategy with their massive reserves of platinum group metals.
Like platinum and palladium.
Right, platinum, palladium, rhodium, which are all critical for hydrogen energy systems, they want those metals beneficiated locally.
Beneficiated, that's a great industry term.
Beneficiation is the key word here. It just means taking the raw mined ore and chemically processing and manufacturing it into a higher value purified product before it ever leaves the country.
Okay, wait, I have to push back on this a little bit.
Yeah.
Because mining and refining at this level requires immense, staggering amounts of capital up front. We are talking billions of dollars and timelines that stretch a decade or more before you see a single dollar of return.
Oh, absolutely. It's a massive risk.
Right. So if governments suddenly slap on export bans or change the regulatory rules mid-game to mandate local refineries, aren't they going to completely terrify and scare off the exact international investors they desperately need to fund this stuff?
That is the central tension of this entire transition. The report points out that while mineral nationalism is a totally legitimate economic strategy to capture domestic value, it immediately raises huge red flags about investment stability.
Because mining capital absolutely hates unpredictability.
They despise it. So these nations are walking a very narrow tightrope. They have to balance resource sovereignty, getting their fair share of the profits, with maintaining the regulatory predictability that keeps global capital flowing in.
It's a delicate balance.
It is. And what's fascinating here is how the VERIDICOR report defines survival in this new era. They introduce a paradigm called regional stakeholder prosperity, or RSP.
RSP. Okay, break down how that actually works on the ground for us.
Well, historically, geology plus capital equaled success. If you found a great copper deposit and had the money to build a mine, you were pretty much set. The VERIDICOR report argues that equation is dead.
Really, dead completely.
Yes. Today, a mining project must actively create local economic progress. If it doesn't utilize stringent environmental protections, if it doesn't provide high-paying local jobs, and if it doesn't have the genuine ongoing consent of the regional stakeholders, it is fundamentally vulnerable to disruption.
Ah, because local communities will simply block the access roads, or newly elected governments will just revoke the operating licenses if they feel exploited.
Exactly. Supply continuity now depends entirely on embedding these multi-billion-dollar projects into stable regional ecosystems. Governance, environmental stewardship, and stakeholder relationships are now just as critical to the supply chain as the heavy drilling machinery.
So African nations are risking global capital flight to build local refineries. But if global capital gets spooked by those export bans or the strict new RSP requirements, that money has to go somewhere else.
It always finds a new home.
Right, and that is exactly what South America is banking on right now. Let's pivot to Latin America.
Yeah, we are seeing the rapid consolidation of what the report calls the Andean Critical Minerals Corridor, primarily driven by Peru and Chile.
Well, Chile is already the top lithium producer globally, and Peru is sitting on absolutely vast, untapped copper reserves across the Andes Mountains.
Huge reserves. And the VERIDICOR report details how Peru is aggressively marketing itself right now to capture the capital that might be, hesitant to invest in Africa.
They're running a textbook mining diplomacy playbook. I read that in early March, the Peruvian Ministry of Energy and Mines attended the PDA 2026 convention in Toronto.
Right, which is one of the biggest mining investment forums on the planet.
Exactly. And their message was highly targeted. They were basically saying, we have the copper you need, and we are the stable, reliable, competitive alternative.
They even secured the rights to host the World Mining Congress in Lima later in 2026. This isn't just a PR stunt. I mean, they're really positioning the country as the geopolitical cornerstone for clean energy.
But how are they actually making it easier for these companies to operate? Words are one thing, but action is another.
They are doing it by actively updating their regulatory frameworks to reduce uncertainty. The specific mechanism here is that Peru is speeding up their environmental permitting processes and streamlining bureaucratic approvals.
So mines can get up and running faster.
Right. They want mines to go from discovery to extraction much faster than before. They want to be the path of least resistance for foreign capital.
But there's a massive physical hurdle that neither Peru nor the DRC nor anyone else can easily bypass. To extract, smelt, and refine these metals at the scale the global transition requires, you need an incomprehensible amount of electricity.
Oh, the power requirements are off the charts. You can't just plug a mega mine or a massive copper smelter into a standard regional wall socket.
No, you definitely can't. Which brings us to the infrastructure nexus. The report throws out a number that honestly made me stop reading and do a double take.
The grid investment number.
Yes. Global grid investment is expected to exceed $500 billion in 2026 alone. $500 billion in a single year just on power grids.
Yeah. To contextualize that, $500 billion is roughly equivalent to building the entire Apollo space program from scratch every single year just in electrical wires and transformers.
That is staggering.
It really is. The energy transition isn't just about erecting wind turbines and solar panels. It is fundamentally about moving that power from where it is generated to where the heavy industry actually needs it.
And the report points to a landmark project in Argentina's Patagonia region to illustrate this perfectly. So Patagonia has incredible world-class wind resources.
Some of the best in the world.
Right. But the people, the factories, and the ports that need that power are hundreds of miles away in Buenos Aires.
And generating the power is entirely useless if you cannot transport it. So the Argentine project is focusing heavily on building a massive new high-voltage transmission network to bridge that geographical gap.
But the logistical challenges of building multi-billion-dollar grids across hundreds of miles of remote terrain are immense.
Immense. And we saw the exact same theme dominate the Africa Energy and Daba Forum in Cape Town in early March.
Because a lot of areas lack basic power.
Exactly. Hundreds of millions of people across Africa lack reliable basic electricity, let alone the dedicated massive industrial power loads required to run new domestic mineral refineries.
It's the ultimate chicken and egg scenario. I mean, we need millions of tons of new copper to build these massive $500 billion electrical transmission grids. But we need those exact same massive new grids to power the mines and the smelters that extract the copper in the first place.
It is a phenomenal infrastructure bottleneck. And that is why we are seeing consortiums of international financial institutions doing things like the $3 billion renewable energy refinancing deal mentioned in the report.
Because the upfront cost is just too high for one group.
Right. The capital required to build out the power generation and the transmission lines simultaneously is staggering, and it requires entirely new financial models to pull off.
So what does this all mean for you? Why does this dense VERIDICOR report actually matter to your daily life? Well, it matters because whether you are in the market for a new electric vehicle, whether you are managing a 401k with tech stocks, or honestly, whether you are just paying your monthly electricity bill, you are subject to these exact forces.
You can't escape it.
You really can't. These shifting tectonic plates of mineral supply chains, these geopolitical chess moves over copper and cobalt, they are directly determining the price, the availability, and the security of your everyday life.
And this raises an important question: who ultimately wins in this new landscape? The VERIDICOR report makes it pretty clear that the future doesn't just belong to the country with the best rocks in the ground anymore.
It takes a lot more than just good geology now.
Exactly. The future belongs to the regions that can align their geology with strong governance, reliable infrastructure, and genuine stakeholder prosperity. The countries that can build the grid, keep the rules stable, and ensure local populations actually benefit prestily, those are the ones who will control the 21st century.
Which leaves us with a genuinely provocative thought to chew on as we wrap up. We are so used to thinking of the centers of global power as the nations that design the tech or control the military.
Right, the traditional superpowers.
Exactly. But if geology dictates the New World Order and the nations with the minerals successfully mandate that all the refining and manufacturing stays within their borders, what happens to the historically wealthy nations that don't have these resources?
That is the million-dollar question.
Are we looking at a future where today's established superpowers become completely dependent client states, entirely beholden to the resource titans of South America and Africa? Could the next Silicon Valley of battery and clean tech innovation end up being in Kinshasa or Lima rather than California or China?
The center of gravity is absolutely shifting, and the established powers are going to have to learn how to navigate a world where they no longer hold all the cards.
It is a completely new board. So next time you look down at that smartphone in your hand, don't just see glass and metal. See the entire fragile, shifting globe that it took to put it there. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. Keep questioning, keep learning, and we'll catch you next time.